one of my absolute heroes, and can I just say that in my job, which is the best job in the world, I get to meet some really amazing people. I've met most of the people who've been in Star Wars, I've met astronauts, but when I had the phone call to say that Gerry Anderson had agreed to be here at the Space Centre this weekend, I did a little dance around my office. So this for me is one of the highlights, and this week has been an absolute dream. Courtesy of ITV, we have all these amazing high-res images that I've had a huge database of these images to go through, and then I had to listen to all the music from all the shows that you've ever produced, and quite frankly there isn't a single one of them that isn't iconic. I've been going around the office as well, dancing and singing, so for that I apologise to everybody who works with me. Gerry, what you've given to every one of us here today is absolutely fantastic, and I think we spoke last night, and it's very telling about the age of the person that you're speaking to based upon the Anderson series that they grew up with. Now for me, it was Zelda taking over breakfast television on children's television, and Terrorhawks, and I absolutely adored that series, but there have been so many, and I'm going to start off, and I do apologise, with probably a question you've been asked a million times before, but I'm sure we all want to know, which one have you enjoyed the most making?
Well, quite honestly, it's something I have to think about very carefully, and it's Thunderbirds, of course.
I think Thunderbirds, is that the one for everybody else? Is it definitely a Thunderbirds crowd?
Oh yes.
That and UFO? Stingray.
Captain Scarlet.
Captain Scarlet. Do you see what I mean? I can tell how old you all are and the diversity of the shows that this amazing man is responsible for. And for that, you know, I say we can't thank you enough. But of course, you know, it's. I was reading your biog, and it says that you started as a plasterer who couldn't plaster. Now, for me, that sounds like a very amusing predicament to be in. So how did it all start for you? Where did this love come from that led you to create these amazing series?
Well, if somebody can get the violins out, I came from a very poor family, and didn't have much of an education. I eventually, because I wasn't doing well at school, I thought I wanted to become an architect. And so I went to a building school. And one of the things that we had to do was we had to learn how to become plasterers. Now, I don't mean plasterers who plaster ceilings and walls. I mean people who create decorative ceilings that you see in stately homes. And for whatever reason, I was really good at that. One of the few things I was good at. And so I was going to become a plasterer. And where do plasterers at this day and age who make these wonderful things for ceilings and so on, where do they work? The answer is mainly in film studios. And so that led me to go around the studios saying, have you got any vacancies for plasterers? And the answer was rather like today. You know, the answer was no. But as a result of that, I got to see film studios, and the bug bit me, and I suddenly decided I wanted to go into the film industry. And that was every bit as difficult to get into then as it is today. I'd like to say just one thing here. It's perfectly true that I can tell the age of people by the shows they like. I have told you a few minutes ago that my favourite show was Thunderbirds. So damn it, you know how old I am.
Yeah, I've given mine away as well, so we're equally in the same predicament. Thunderbirds was amazing, and I mean, we were talking to Shane Rimmer, who was the voice of Scott Tracy, amongst others, which I've just discovered, and he's with us here this weekend as well. And he was talking about the creative talent, and he was talking about how vibrant and amazing the group of you that created these shows were. He was talking about his favourite episode was where there were crocodiles and alligators, and you used newts, because of course that fits the scale perfectly. So I mean, it must have been fantastic to have this group of people, and of course yourself, and to be able to use your imagination to create something as amazing as this is that we see behind us, that just looks superb even to this day.
Well, on that particular show, I can never talk about this without thinking of an incident there. Many years ago, there would be children's comics, and they usually came out once a week. And at the end of each episode, as it were, in the comic, there was like a magic moment where, as a kid, you couldn't help. Hello, yeah. I'll try and talk a bit louder. As I was saying, the comic would come to an end where the hero was about to die, and you then had to wait for another week until you found out how he got out of this amazing situation, impossible situation. And it usually started the following week with a drawing which said, "and with one mighty leap," and that's how they got out of it. But when we made the crocodile picture, we brought in some crocodiles, and these wouldn't move. I mean, I remember the late Derek Meddings coming in to say to me, "Look, we've warmed the tanks to the right temperature, we've brought the crocodiles in, we put them down, and they don't move." Anyway, that's part one of the story. Part two is, while we were shooting that, I was in my office, and the girl on the switchboard phoned me and said, "Gerry, there's an inspector from the RSPCA here who understands that your people are giving these crocodiles electric shocks, and we're here to investigate this accusation." So I said, "Well, look, it's the first I've known about it, but let's go straight in and have a look." So without being announced, we went into the stage where they were shooting this particular picture, and the inspector said to Derek, who was in charge of the special effects, "We've been told that you're giving these animals electric shocks. Is that true?" And he said, "Well, I've got to be honest with you, it is true. But the reason is that we put them down and they don't move. They don't even move their eyes. We're trying to make a film. So we give them an electric shock and it makes them jump. And that's so we can film it." And the inspector said, "Can I see over there, is that Lady Penelope?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "You make Thunderbirds here?" We said, "Yes." He said, "Is it possible for me to look around the studio?" So we took him around the studio. And when he came back, we went back into this particular stage where they were filming the crocodiles. And he said, "It's absolutely amazing what you do here. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But anyway, can we just get back to this situation. You give these animals electric shocks, and Derek said, well, yes, I've already explained why. And he says, the inspector said, what sort of voltage do you use? And Derek was now behind the 8 ball, and he said, well, we give him 12 volts. And the inspector said, 12 volts? 12 volts? These animals have got tough skins. Wind it up to 100. Which he did. And he said, go on, now touch them. And he said, there you are, that makes the buggers move.
I was wondering where that was going. I got quite worried at some points there.
So the answer is yes. It's a long answer, but yes, I remember that well.
God, you did have some fun. Right, this is called a question and answer session, and this is your opportunity to ask those questions. You don't want to hear me talk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my challenge Annika running around the Space Theatre. If you do have a question, put your hand up. I'll pass you the microphone, and then you ask your question, and then I'll take it back and we'll listen to Gerry answer, and I'll try and get as many and try and go from side to side so that we get some everybody in that we can. So I'm going to start over this side, so if you'd like to put your hands up if you have a question. I'm still walking, I can't see a single hand. Come on, this is Gerry. Oh, hang on, there's a little person. Right, can we do pass the microphone? Hazzy, do you want to shout? Do you want the microphone?
How did you make the giant alligators in Thunderbirds?
They were the little ones.
Yes, can you repeat that?
How did you make them look big?
Cool. Okay, Gerry, the question is relating to how did you make things look big? Because obviously we've talked about the fact that you use little crocodiles to make big crocodiles, but how did you make that illusion, as it were?
Are you referring to this particular film?
Yeah, in this particular question, yeah.
Well, it was very, very simple actually, because the crocodiles were probably 12 to 15 feet in length, and the puppets were really only about 9 inches tall. So of course, if you put the two together on the screen, then obviously the crocodiles would look that much bigger. But to make the crocodiles look bigger than the puppets was just a question of which we put nearer to the camera. And so clearly, by varying the distance from the camera, we could make the crocodiles and the puppets look smaller or bigger.
Yeah, I think when we look at some of the pictures, certainly of the puppets, we're looking at things, when we were talking to Shane earlier, he was talking about the fact that you'd have an airport that would be the size of sort of one of these little parts of the stage, and so, you know, it came down to an amazing creative team that you had with you, making these sets that, I mean, if you go and see, we've got some of the BBC visual effects, Mike Tucker and Matt Irvine are in the galleries. If you go and see some of the stuff that they've got on their stage, you'll see miniature props and how those sets then with puppets made everything look so much bigger. It's that whole illusion, and so if you go into the galleries, you'll be able to see how that works in out there. So shall we have another question? Maybe this side. Oh, there we go. We've got one already. He's not saying FAB. Sorry, to put that into context, this gentleman got the best question from Shane Rimmer. He got him to say FAB Virgil. It was a great way to finish your talk.
Hi, it's just regarding Joe 90. What gave you the influence of making a series about a child secret agent rather than being like an adult secret agent? Was there any particular influences at the time?
Yes, I mean, going back to Joe 90, we're going back a long time. But around about that time, magnetic recording came into being. And this was really wonderful because it meant that we could use a piece of film that was had a magnetic coating. We could record on it, and then amazingly we were able to erase the recording and then record something else. And I remember thinking that this is very interesting because the human brain works on electrical impulses, minute, but nevertheless our brains work on electricity. And so I started to think, if we can remove a recording from a piece of film, I suppose theoretically we could remove the brain patterns from a human being, and then we could take that recording of the brain patterns and copy them into somebody else's brain. And that, of course, opened up immediately endless possibilities for stories. And of course, one of the popular stories was where a little boy would be given, say, the life knowledge of a jet pilot, and therefore he could go into an airfield, climb up to have a look inside the cockpit, and then start the engine and steal the aeroplane. I think I'm talking about the right
No, absolutely,
series,
yeah.
And so it became one of the big points where, one could take a child or a very young man and get them, for example, to steal a Russian aircraft and fly one back so we could see how it worked and so forth and so on. But that's how it started, comparing the brain with the ability to record on magnetic strips and wipe it clean.
Fantastic. Does that answer your question? Brilliant. Okay, do we have a question from this side over here? Oh, I have a glamorous assistant now. Anyway, you like.
Hi. When it comes to the casting of shows like Fireball XL5, you had all these actors like Paul Maxwell, David Graham, but what was there a decision made for why you voiced Robert the Robot in that show?
This, you realise, is a deadly secret which I've tried to bury for years. I'm not an actor. I've never wanted to be an actor. And here I made my acting debut as a robot. The answer to your question is that today, with modern recording and these huge mixing desks that you see in studios now, today you simply walk into the sound department and say, I want a robot voice. And they will immediately plug things up and say, what about this one? Or do you prefer that one? There's absolutely no problem at all. But at the time, there was no way we could produce a robot voice. And so we made a lot of inquiries, and we found a university up north where they were working with experiments on the human voice. And so I went up there and explained the position to them. And at the time, this is the sad part of the story, at the time, people who had cancer of the larynx had to have the larynx removed. Today, of course, they don't have to do that, thank God. But at the time, that was the treatment for cancer of the throat. And then, in order that they could communicate, they gave them a little thing they could hold in their hand, which made a buzzing noise, a monotone, just bzzz. And what happened was, if you open your mouth, put this device not in the mouth, but close to the open mouth, the sound would come out of the mouth. And then if you mouthed the words, like, "This is Gerry Anderson," that caused that buzzing noise to reproduce what had been spoken. And it came up like this. "This is Gerry Anderson." Not bad, eh? Of course, looking back, I don't know why I didn't have the sense to do that in the first place. But the way we produced the voice was we got a wooden box, we drilled a hole one end, which was big enough for me to push my mouth into through the hole, and at the other end it had a small microphone, so that when I spoke, the microphone picked up the sound, which was robotic for the reasons I've just explained. So I'd be glad to tell you anything that you haven't understood, but that's how we produced the voice.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, question over from this side.
How did Dick Spanner come about?
Oh, yeah.
There will now be a short interval. Yes, I can only remember part of this story. There was a lady broadcaster who had very big teeth which protruded forwards, and you still hear her on occasions, but I can't remember. Can anybody remember the person I'm talking about?
Oh, we've got Janet Street Porter.
Thank you.
Yeah, Esther Ransom this side, Janet Street Porter that side.
Janet Street Porter.
There you go.
Well, we've got over that bit. Now, what was the question again?
How did Dick Spanner come about?
Right. For some reason or other, I met with Janet Street Porter at the BBC, who wanted to make a recording of my life story. And I went along to the BBC and met her. She was very helpful, very warm, made me very comfortable. And she said, well, we would love to do this. It would mean several sessions of you coming in and talking about your life. And I said, well, that's fine. And then I'd like to hear it before it goes out, because I know, because I was an editor myself once, that by cutting and rearranging things, you can make up some horrible statements which, were never made in the first place. So I said, for that reason, when you finish this, I'd like to hear it before you put it out. She said, no, you can't do that. If we record it, it's got to go out exactly as. So I said, well, I'm sorry, I won't do it. And then we parted company, good friends, And then she came back on the telephone and said, I've got a show going on. I can't remember the name of the show, unfortunately, but it was her show that was broadcast every week. And she said, could you make an amusing little, whatever it was, 5 minutes, I think, so that I can pepper it into my show? And we said, of course, and this is what we did. And as part of making a comical show, we invented the character Dick Spanner, and it was made, and that was the way it came about. The sort of humour was wonderful. The late Tony Barwick wrote most of the scripts.
Yes.
And I hope you won't be offended if I just be slightly naughty, but to give you an idea of the fun we had with Dick Spanner was that Tony Barwick wrote that Dick Spanner was sleeping in a hotel, and he was fast asleep in his room when he woke up, and he heard a noise, and the noise was psst, psst, psst. And then Tony wrote underneath that Dick Spanner said, that's what it was, there was somebody psing outside my window. That was the sort of humour that went into that show. And we were talking about Tony Barwick, the late Tony Barwick, the writer, and he wrote some hilarious stuff for that. Most of them were cleaner than the one I just told you, but that's how it came about.
Janet Street Porter, that's how it came about. Right, Network 7.
Thank you very much. Can you come along and join me, please?
Okay, we've got time for one more question then on this side. Complete with sound effects.
I just wanted to know, out of all the characters, which is your favourite and why?
My favourite character from all the shows?
Yeah, all the shows. And remember, Shane's listening.
Well, I've always had a soft spot for Parker, mainly because I remember how his voice and his patter came about. Have I got time to explain? Close to our studio was a beautiful pub called the King's Arms, and the lady who ran it did wonderful English cooking, and we used to go there pretty well every day for our lunch. And they had a waiter, a man of some years, who used to wear his little white coat, and he would serve the food to everybody. And he had a particular way of speaking. It was most odd. He would drop his H's. So instead of saying how, he would say ow, sounded Cockney. And then he put the H back in the wrong place. So instead of saying is, he would say is. That's not a very good example, but because of that impediment, he had this very, very unusual delivery. And David Graham was doing voices for me at the time. And I came back to the studio and I said, look, I want you to go to the King's Arms every lunchtime for a year. Sorry, I was never that generous. I want you to go to have a lunch there every lunchtime for a week and pick up the way this character speaks. And David Graham went down there and he used to get Arthur, was his name, chatting, And he finally came back with a carbon copy and was able to reproduce the way he spoke perfectly. And in the meantime, the character character that we were creating was completed, and we put the voice together, and of course that gave us the wonderful character which became my favourite, and I have a feeling was also the favourite of many other people. One of the things that made us in a bit of a hole was that character became famous overnight, and the waiter who we copied, his name was Arthur, and we had a meeting to say, now what are we going to do about Arthur, because Arthur was originally a Cockney, and he'd pulled himself up by his bootlaces and was now very proud of what he thought was being ever so posh. And we said, well, shall we tell him about this or not? And we just decided that because he wanted to be posh, if he thought that he still sounded like he did, he might be terribly upset, so we decided not to tell him. And he went to his death never knowing that he was the voice of this very, very famous character.
Definitely a favourite character amongst a lot of people, I'm sure. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our question and answer session here in the Space Theatre with Gerry Anderson. I will, in just one moment, be asking you to put your hands together and thank him for being here with us. The exit to the Space Theatre is situated at the back. It is the door that you came... Oh, sorry, it's the door over the other shoulder. You're going to exit through. If you just... There's a member of Space Crew. Wave! You're going out over there. If I could ask you, if you do have any questions or if you do want an autograph, please, please, please don't come to the front. Please do go and see Mr. Anderson once he has returned to his desk, which is in the galleries there. It is lunchtime, so there will be a little bit of a break. But if you do have any questions or do want an autograph, please, please don't come to the front. Please wait until he's back out there. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, can I please ask you to give your appreciation and put your hands together for Gerry Anderson. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have any music for you to exit to, but if you'd like to make your way towards the exit, that'd be grateful. Thank you.